A homeless Navy SEAL inherited a billionaire's hidden fortress, but his dog sensed something inside that shouldn't exist. The wind howled across the frozen Colorado mountains as Caleb Walker sat alone in his rusted truck, until a letter changed everything. A mansion, a fortune, a name he didn't recognize. But the moment his K9 Duke saw the key, he growled. Because some inheritances don't save your life, they pull you into something far more dangerous. Comment 1 if you'd step inside, or 0 if you'd walk away, and tell us where you're watching from. The wind came down the mountain like it had something to prove. It rattled the thin metal frame of the old pickup, slipping through every crack and seam, as if the truck itself were tired of pretending it could keep anything out. Frost had crept across the inside of the windshield overnight, turning the glass into a pale, fractured mirror. Outside, the Colorado mountains stretched wide and empty, buried under a blanket of hard snow that reflected the early morning light in cold silence. Inside the truck, Caleb Walker opened his eyes. For a moment, he didn't move. That moment, right between sleep and memory, was the only place he still felt safe. No noise, no weight in his chest, no ghosts. Then it hit. A distant echo. Not real, but close enough to taste. The sharp crack of something breaking. Gunfire, maybe. Or a door slamming. His body reacted before his mind could catch up. His breath shortened. His fingers curled tight against the thin blanket, as if gripping something that wasn't there anymore. Easy, a low voice might have said once. You're good. You're here. But that voice was gone. What remained was a steady pressure against his side. Warm, solid, real. Caleb turned his head slowly. Duke was already watching him. The German shepherd lay curled beside him on the worn bench seat. Amber eyes steady, ears forward. Not alarmed, but alert in that quiet, knowing way only a trained K9 could be. He hadn't moved during the night. He rarely did. Always positioned just right, just close enough to feel the shift in Caleb's breathing, the tremor in his muscles. Caleb exhaled, long and slow. Yeah, he muttered, voice rough from the cold. I know. Duke didn't move, just watched, waiting. The storm in Caleb's chest loosened, inch by inch, like a knot pulled too tight finally beginning to give. He reached out, fingers brushing the thick fur along Duke's neck. The dog leaned into it slightly, not needy, not demanding, just enough. Grounding. Caleb sat up, joints stiff from the cold and too many nights like this. The inside of the truck smelled faintly of metal, worn leather, and the kind of quiet that settled in when a man stopped expecting anything better. Outside, the world was already awake. A thin ribbon of highway cut through the valley below, barely touched by traffic. A single gas station stood a mile down the road, its flickering sign barely holding on against the wind. Beyond that, nothing but trees and frozen earth stretching toward the horizon. This was where he had ended up. Not because he chose it, not because it meant anything, just because there was nowhere else left. Caleb pushed open the truck door. The cold hit him hard, biting through his jacket like it had been waiting. Duke was out before him, landing silently in the snow, scanning the tree line in one smooth motion. Always checking. Always first. Caleb followed, boots crunching against the ice. He rolled his shoulders once, trying to shake the stiffness out, but it lingered. It always did. There was a time when his body didn't feel like this. A time when every movement had purpose, when the cold was just another condition to overcome, when he had a team at his back and a mission in front of him. Now, it was just him. And Duke. He reached into the truck bed, pulling out a small metal cup and a dented thermos. The coffee inside was barely warm, but it didn't matter. He drank it anyway, standing there in the open, eyes scanning the distant road without really seeing it. Duke moved in a slow circle, nose low, tracking scents that meant nothing to Caleb but everything to him. After a moment, he stopped, ears twitching slightly toward the highway. Caleb noticed. "Just a car," he said quietly, more out of habit than certainty. Duke didn't react. Not yet. Then came the sound, faint at first, tires against ice, an engine struggling slightly in the cold. A vehicle appeared around the bend, moving slower than most would out here. It wasn't local. Caleb could tell by the way it hesitated, like it didn't belong to the road. The truck rolled closer, then slowed to a stop a few yards away. Caleb's body shifted automatically, not aggressive, not defensive, just ready. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, bundled in a heavy coat that didn't quite hide the way he carried himself. Upright, deliberate, not military, but not soft either. He held something in his hand. An envelope. Duke stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between Caleb and the stranger. Not barking, not lunging, just there. A line drawn in silence. The man noticed. He hesitated for half a second, then raised his free hand slightly. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. His voice carried just enough to reach them over the wind. Caleb didn't respond right away. "Name's Daniel Pierce," the man continued carefully. "I'm with a legal firm out of Denver." Still nothing. The man took one slow step closer, then stopped. He didn't push it. "I've been looking for you," he said. Caleb finally spoke. "You found me." The man gave a small nod. Wasn't easy. Duke's eyes never left him. Pierce glanced down at the dog, then back at Caleb. "That your K9? Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. "Yeah." There was something in the way he said it. Not pride, not ownership. More like truth. Pierce seemed to understand enough not to press further. Instead, he held out the envelope. "This is for you," he said. "Certified." The paper looked out of place in this landscape. Clean, thick, untouched by the cold. Caleb didn't move to take it. "What is it?" he asked. Pierce hesitated, just long enough to show it mattered. "It's a notification," he said. "Inheritance." The word didn't land right. Caleb frowned slightly. "Wrong guy." "No," Pierce replied quietly. "Not wrong." He stepped forward just enough to place the envelope on the hood of the pickup, then backed off again. Careful, respectful. Duke moved first. He approached the truck slowly, nose lifting toward the envelope. His body stiffened, Not aggressive, but alert in a way Caleb hadn't seen yet that morning. A low sound rumbled deep in his chest. Not a bark. A warning. Caleb noticed that too. He stepped forward, eyes narrowing slightly as he picked up the envelope. It was heavier than it should have been. His name was printed across the front in clean, precise lettering. Caleb Walker. No mistake. No confusion. He tore it open. Inside, a single sheet of paper and something else. Metal, cold against his fingers. A key. Caleb's eyes moved across the words slowly. Legal language, formal, final. Then the line that didn't belong. You have been named the sole heir to the estate of Arthur Whitlock. Caleb blinked once. The wind howled louder around them, as if reacting. He looked up. Never heard of him, he said. Pierce studied him for a moment. Most people haven't. Caleb glanced back down at the paper. The words didn't change, didn't rearrange themselves into something that made more sense. The key rested in his palm, heavier than it had any right to be. Duke let out another low growl. This time, Caleb didn't ignore it. He closed his hand around the key, feeling its weight press into his skin. For the first time in a long while, something unfamiliar stirred beneath the numbness. Not hope. Not yet. But something close enough to make him pause. Where is it? Caleb asked. Pierce didn't smile. Up in the mountains, he said. About 50 miles from here. Caleb looked past him, toward the endless stretch of frozen wilderness. Duke stepped closer, brushing against his leg. Watching. Waiting. The wind didn't stop. But something had shifted. And Caleb Walker, who had spent so long being invisible, was suddenly being seen, whether he wanted it or not. The wind didn't ease up after the man left. It carried the sound of tires fading down the mountain road until there was nothing again but the empty stretch of white and the low hum of cold silence. Caleb stood there beside his truck, the envelope in one hand, the key in the other, staring at something that didn't belong in his world. Duke hadn't moved. His body stayed angled toward the direction the vehicle had gone, ears forward, muscles tight under his coat. The growl had stopped, but the tension hadn't. Caleb noticed. Yeah, he muttered under his breath. You don't like it. Duke turned his head slightly, eyes flicking to Caleb's hand. The key. Not the paper. Not the words. The key. That was what bothered him. Caleb closed his fingers around it again, feeling its edges press into his palm. It wasn't decorative. It wasn't something you kept for show. It was solid, heavy, old-fashioned in a way that suggested whatever it opened mattered. He slid it into his jacket pocket. The envelope followed. Let's get out of the wind, he said. Duke didn't move at first. He took one last slow scan of the tree line, nose lifting slightly, pulling in scents the human world couldn't understand. Then, reluctantly, he turned and followed Caleb back toward the truck. Inside, the cold had settled deeper. Caleb shut the door, cutting off the worst of the wind, and leaned back against the seat. For a moment, he just sat there, staring at nothing. Then he pulled the paper back out. Arthur Whitlock. The name meant nothing. No memory, no connection, no reason. Caleb had learned a long time ago that nothing came without a cost, especially not something like this, especially not for someone like him. He read the line again. Soul heir. It almost made him laugh. Duke shifted beside him, then pushed his nose forward, nudging Caleb's arm. Not gently, not playfully, insistent. Caleb looked down. What? Duke nudged again, this time toward the paper, then toward the pocket where the key rested. Then he stilled, waiting. Caleb exhaled slowly. You think it's trouble? Duke didn't move, didn't blink. Caleb let his head fall back against the seat, eyes closing briefly. Yeah, he said. Me too. The silence stretched. Outside, the light had begun to shift, the pale gray morning giving way to something brighter, though no warmer. Time didn't stop for confusion. Eventually, Caleb reached for the ignition. The engine struggled before catching, the sound rough but steady enough. He rubbed a hand over his face, dragging himself back into motion. Come on, he said. We'll get coffee. The diner sat just off the highway, a narrow building with faded red siding and a flickering neon sign that read, Open when it felt like it. Inside, the warmth hit first. Then the smell. Coffee, bacon, something fried that had been cooking too long. The kind of place where people didn't ask questions unless they already thought they knew the answer. Caleb stepped in, boots leaving a trail of melting snow behind him. Conversations dipped for half a second, then resumed. He was used to that. Being noticed just long enough to be dismissed. Duke followed close at his side, silent as ever, drawing a few longer glances from the regulars, not because he was loud, because he wasn't. A dog like that didn't belong to just anyone. Caleb took a seat at the counter. Coffee? The waitress asked, already reaching for a mug. Yeah. She poured without asking anything else, sliding the cup in front of him. Her eyes lingered a moment longer than necessary. Not unkind, just curious. You been up on Ridge Road? She asked casually. Caleb glanced at her. Why? She shrugged, wiping down the counter. Heard someone was asking around for you this morning. Caleb didn't answer right away. Duke shifted under the counter, pressing lightly against Caleb's leg. Grounding again. A guy in a truck, she added. Didn't look like he belonged out here. Caleb took a slow sip of the coffee. It was hot, bitter, real. Found me anyway, he said. She nodded, like that confirmed something. Figured. A man at the end of the counter leaned over slightly. You hear about that place up past the ridge? He said, not bothering to lower his voice. Old Whitlock Estate? Caleb didn't react. The man continued anyway. Guy built that thing like a fortress. Money out the ears. Then one day, gone. Just like that. He snapped his fingers. No one's seen him since, the waitress added quietly. Duke's head lifted. Just a fraction. Caleb noticed. People say all kinds of things, the man went on. Government contracts, tech stuff, stuff that don't stay buried. Caleb set the cup down. Where is it? He asked. The man studied him for a second, like he was deciding whether to say more. Then he pointed with his chin. Up past the old logging road. About an hour if the weather holds. The waitress shook her head slightly. Road's not great this time of year. Caleb didn't respond. Duke shifted again. His body angled now, not toward the voices, but toward the door. Listening. Watching. Caleb followed his gaze. Nothing. Just the empty parking lot and the wind pushing snow across the asphalt. Still, something about the way Duke held himself hadn't changed. Not since the envelope. Caleb reached into his pocket, feeling the edge of the key again. Heavy. Real. He finished the coffee in one long pull, then stood. How much? On the house, the waitress said. Caleb frowned slightly. I don't... Just take it, she cut in. Feels like you're gonna need it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Caleb nodded once. Thanks. He turned and headed for the door. Duke was already there. Waiting. Back outside, the sky had cleared just enough to show the line of mountains cutting across the horizon. Caleb paused beside the truck. The road stretched out ahead of him. One direction led back to the same place he'd been. The other led somewhere he didn't understand. Duke stood at his side, still, focused, not on the road behind them, but the one ahead. Caleb looked down at him. You're not gonna like it, he said. Duke didn't move, didn't back away, didn't hesitate. Caleb let out a breath. Yeah, he muttered. Me neither. He opened the truck door. The engine turned over again, louder this time, like it knew it was being asked for more. Caleb pulled onto the road, tires crunching through ice as the diner disappeared behind them. Ahead, the mountains waited. And whatever Arthur Whitlock had left behind was no longer just a name on paper. Duke sat upright in the passenger seat, eyes fixed forward, body tense but controlled. Not afraid. Just ready. Caleb tightened his grip on the wheel. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just surviving. He was heading towards something. Even if it meant walking straight into trouble. And somewhere deep down, past the doubt and the exhaustion, a single thought refused to stay buried. Maybe this wasn't an accident. Maybe it never was. The truck climbed higher into the mountains, the road narrowing with every mile. What had started as cracked asphalt slowly gave way to gravel, then to a rough stretch of packed dirt and ice that twisted through dense pine forest, like it had been forgotten by time. The world beyond the windshield shifted from open sky to shadow, tall trees closing in, their branches heavy with snow, blocking out the light. Caleb kept both hands steady on the wheel. The tires slipped once, then caught again. He adjusted without thinking. Old instincts. Duke didn't sit anymore. He stood. Front paws braced against the dashboard, body angled forward, nose working the air through the small crack in the window. His ears flicked constantly, left, right, forward, tracking sounds Caleb couldn't hear. Every few seconds, Duke would freeze, still as stone, then shift again. Caleb noticed the pattern. You smell something? No answer. Just that quiet focus. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. No passing cars, no distant engines, no signs of life. Even the wind seemed to fade, replaced by a kind of heavy silence that pressed in from all sides. Caleb glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing behind them. Just the road disappearing into the trees. He looked forward again. "How much farther?" he muttered, more to himself than anything. Duke suddenly stiffened. Not just alert. Locked. His body went rigid, ears snapping forward, eyes fixed on something ahead, something Caleb couldn't see yet. Caleb eased off the gas. "What is it?" The truck rolled slowly around the next bend. And then he saw it. The road opened without warning. The trees parted just enough to reveal a clearing, a wide stretch of land carved into the mountainside. Snow lay untouched across it, smooth and unbroken, like no one had stepped there in years. At the far edge of the clearing, the mansion. Caleb's foot came off the gas completely. The truck rolled to a slow stop. For a moment, he didn't speak, didn't move. The place wasn't just big. It was massive. Steel and glass rising out of stone, built into the mountain itself like it belonged there. Clean lines, sharp edges, modern, but with something colder underneath. The kind of design that wasn't meant to impress people. It was meant to control space. Wide windows stretched across the front, reflecting the pale sky like mirrors. A long driveway curved up toward a set of heavy double doors, flanked by dark stone columns. To the left, partially buried in snow, sat what looked like a private landing strip, short, but real. To the right, a secondary structure, garage or storage, its doors shut tight. Everything about it said wealth, but nothing about it said welcome. Duke let out a low sound, not a growl. Something quieter, uncertain. Caleb opened the truck door slowly. The cold hit again, sharper here like it had been waiting. Duke jumped out immediately, landing in the snow without a sound. He didn't run forward. He circled. Wide, keeping distance from the house. His nose stayed low at first, then lifted as he caught something on the wind. He paused near the edge of the clearing, body angled toward the tree line, not the mansion. Caleb stepped out fully, boots sinking slightly into the snow. He closed the door behind him and stood there, looking at the place. "Doesn't look abandoned," he said quietly. It didn't. There was no decay, no broken windows, no collapsed structure. Just stillness. Too perfect. Like someone had pressed pause. Duke moved closer now, but not toward the front entrance. He kept a slow, careful pace, circling the perimeter of the clearing, stopping every few yards to listen, to smell, to check. Caleb watched him for a moment. Then he started walking up the driveway. Each step echoed slightly under the thin layer of snow. The silence made every sound feel louder than it should have been. Halfway up, he stopped. Something didn't sit right. He turned slowly, scanning the area. The trees, the roofline, the windows. Nothing moved. But the feeling stayed, like being watched. Duke returned quickly, moving to Caleb's side without being called. His body stayed close now, shoulder brushing against Caleb's leg. Not relaxed, not calm. Present. Caleb reached down briefly, resting his hand on Duke's back. "All right," he said. We go together. They moved the rest of the way in silence. At the top of the steps, Caleb paused again. Up close, the doors were even heavier than they looked. Reinforced metal beneath dark wood paneling. No handle visible, just a recessed slot. Caleb reached into his jacket, pulled out the key. Duke shifted instantly. His body angled toward the door, ears forward, muscles tightening again. That same low warning hum returned, barely audible. Caleb glanced at him. I know. He stepped forward. The key slid into the slot with a solid, precise fit. For a second, nothing happened. Then a quiet click. Not loud. Not mechanical in the usual sense. Clean, controlled. The doors unlocked. Caleb's hand hovered there for a moment. Then he pushed. The doors opened slowly, smoothly, as if they'd been waiting for that exact motion. No resistance. No hesitation. Just a soft movement inward. Darkness greeted them. Not complete, but close. A wide entry hall stretched ahead, lit only by faint natural light filtering through high windows. Dust didn't hang in the air. Nothing smelled stale. It was preserved. Caleb stepped inside. Duke followed immediately, crossing the threshold without breaking stride. But the moment his paws hit the floor, he stopped. Dead still. His head turned slightly. Left, then right, then forward again. Listening. The door behind them closed. On its own. The sound echoed through the hall, low, final. Caleb turned sharply. No one there. No movement. Just the door sealed shut. He exhaled slowly. All right, he muttered. His voice sounded different in here. Smaller. The space absorbed it. He took a few steps forward. The floor beneath him was polished stone, the walls lined with clean surfaces, minimal decoration. No clutter, no personal touch. Except frames on the far wall. Caleb walked closer. Photographs, or what used to be. The images were still there, but the faces scratched out. Every single one. Deliberate. Deep enough to ruin the image completely. Caleb frowned slightly. Yeah, that's not normal. Duke didn't move toward the wall. He stayed where he was, eyes fixed down the main hallway. Something deeper inside. Caleb turned to follow his gaze. The hallway stretched long and straight, disappearing into shadow. Doors lined both sides, all closed. The air felt colder here, not from temperature, from absence. Caleb took another step, then another. Behind him, Duke finally moved, not ahead. Beside him. Close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Every instinct Caleb had told him the same thing Duke already knew. This place wasn't empty. It was quiet. And there was a difference. Somewhere deep inside the mansion, something shifted. Not loud, not clear, but enough. Duke stopped again. This time the growl came back. Low. Steady. Unmistakable. Caleb didn't ask what it meant. He already knew. They weren't alone. Not really. And whatever waited deeper in that house had just realized they were there. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It pressed in. Caleb stood still, every sense tightening, the same way it used to before a mission turned bad. His eyes adjusted to the low light, scanning corners, angles, reflections, looking for movement where there shouldn't be any. Nothing. But the feeling stayed. Duke didn't bark. He didn't charge. He stayed locked in place, head low, ears forward, body aligned with the hallway ahead, like it was a line he didn't want crossed too fast. Caleb exhaled slowly. "Easy," he said, though his voice barely carried. He stepped forward again. One step, then another. The sound of his boots echoed softly against the stone floor, each footfall swallowed almost immediately by the vast space. The hallway stretched long and sterile, lined with doors that looked identical. No labels, no markings, no clues. Whoever built this place didn't want things found easily. Caleb moved past the first door, then the second. He tested one handle. Locked. Another. Locked. Duke stayed close, brushing against Caleb's leg every few steps, then drifting slightly ahead, just enough to lead, but never far enough to leave him. They reached the end of the hall. A larger space opened up. A living area, or what passed for one. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced the mountains, letting in pale daylight that reflected off polished surfaces. Furniture sat perfectly arranged, untouched, unused. A leather couch, a glass table, shelves lined with books that looked like they had never been opened. It wasn't abandoned. It was preserved. Caleb stepped further in, his reflection faintly visible in the glass. For a second, it didn't look like him. Just a shape. A man out of place. Duke moved ahead now, crossing the room in a slow arc. His nose traced the edges of the furniture, then the air, then the floor again. He stopped near the far wall and froze. Caleb noticed. "What is it?" Duke didn't answer. He just stood there staring, not at the wall itself, but at something near it. Caleb walked over. Portraits. Not photographs this time. Paintings. Large, expensive, framed in heavy gold. Each one showed a person, or had. The faces were gone, not faded, destroyed, scratched, carved, erased with deliberate force. Every single one. Caleb leaned in slightly. Whoever had done this hadn't rushed. They had taken their time, made sure nothing recognizable remained. "Yeah," Caleb muttered. "That's not someone leaving in a hurry." Duke let out a quiet huff, then turned away from the wall completely. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't where his attention stayed. Caleb followed his movement. They crossed into another section of the house. This one darker, the light thinner, filtered through narrower windows. The air felt heavier here, different. Caleb didn't like it. His shoulders tightened without him noticing. His breathing shifted, just slightly. Then a sound. Sharp, sudden, a creak. Not from the house settling. Not from the wind. From inside. Caleb's body reacted instantly. He turned fast, eyes snapping toward the source, one of the side corridors they hadn't checked yet. Nothing moved. Nothing followed. But the sound had been real. too real. His chest tightened. The air shifted. And just like that, he wasn't there anymore. The walls changed. The light dropped. The silence turned into something louder, something that lived in memory. A hallway. Different. Narrower. Dust in the air. The smell of heat, metal, something burning, a voice shouting, a flash, a blast that never fully stopped echoing. Caleb staggered back a step, breath catching hard in his throat. Not here, not now. But his body didn't care. His hand clenched into a fist, knuckles whitening, his vision narrowing as the past forced its way forward. Walker. The voice wasn't real, but it felt like it was. Close. Too close. Caleb's breathing broke. Fast. Shallow. The walls around him blurred. And then pressure. Solid, real. Duke. The dog pressed into him hard, shoulder against Caleb's thigh, head pushing upward into his hand with force, not gentle, not comforting, grounding, demanding. Here. Now. Caleb's hand dropped instinctively, gripping the thick fur along Duke's neck. The contact snapped something back into place. The hallway returned. The light steadied. The sound was gone. Caleb sucked in a breath, deep this time, real air filling his lungs again. "All right," he whispered, voice shaking slightly. "I'm here." Duke didn't move away. He stayed pressed close, holding position until Caleb's breathing slowed, until his body caught up, until the moment passed. Only then did he ease back. Not far. Just enough. Caleb ran a hand over his face, dragging himself back fully into the present. His pulse still pounded, but it was fading. He looked down at Duke. "Good call." Duke blinked once, then turned, back toward the corridor, the same one the sound had come from. Caleb followed his gaze. The unease hadn't gone anywhere. If anything, it had sharpened. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We're not alone." He moved toward the corridor again, slower this time, more controlled, more deliberate. They stepped into the narrower space. The walls here were darker, the lighting dimmer, the air cooler. The kind of place you didn't design for comfort. You designed it for function, or secrecy. Halfway down, Caleb noticed something. A door. Different from the others. Not wood. Metal. Reinforced. No handle. Just a flat surface, clean and unmarked. Duke approached it slowly, then stopped. Sat. Perfectly still. Not relaxed. Not calm. Focused. Caleb recognized the signal. Target. He stepped closer. Ran his hand along the surface. Cold. Solid. Important. "This," he said quietly, "isn't just a room." Duke didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the door. Waiting. Caleb glanced back down the corridor. Still empty. Still silent. But the feeling was stronger now. Whatever had made that sound earlier, whatever had watched, it was still here. somewhere deeper in the house. Caleb turned back to the door. His reflection stared back at him, faint and distorted in the metal surface. For a second, it didn't look like a man who had lost everything. It looked like someone standing on the edge of something bigger, something dangerous. He reached into his jacket, felt the key. Heavy, certain. Behind him, Duke shifted slightly, just enough to remind him. "You're not alone." Caleb nodded once, then looked back at the door. "This place," he murmured. "It's not about money." The house didn't answer, but it didn't need to. It had already started showing him the truth. And it wasn't done yet. Caleb stood in front of the reinforced door for a long moment, the key still heavy in his hand, the silence pressing in from every side. Duke didn't move. He remained seated, perfectly still, eyes locked on the metal surface like it was more than just a door. His breathing was calm, but his body held tension, coiled, ready, waiting for something Caleb hadn't seen yet. Caleb glanced down at the key, then back at the door. "No markings," he muttered. "No keypad, no handle." That meant one thing. It wasn't meant to be opened by just anyone. He slid the key toward the surface, searching for an entry point. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint click. Not from the door. From somewhere lower. Duke's head snapped down. His entire posture changed. He stood immediately and stepped away from the door, moving instead toward the floor, just to the right of it. His nose dropped, hovering inches above the surface as he inhaled sharply. Then he pawed at it. Once, twice. Harder the second time. Caleb's attention shifted instantly. "What is it?" Duke didn't respond. He kept tapping the same spot, precise, controlled, not frantic. His ears stayed forward, his body angled in a way Caleb recognized from years of working side by side. Target located. Caleb crouched beside him. The floor looked like solid stone at first glance. Polished, seamless, but up close there was something off, a faint outline, a barely visible seam running in a rectangular shape about 3 feet wide. Hidden, deliberately. Caleb ran his fingers along the edge. "There you go," he murmured. Duke stepped back slightly, giving him room, but his eyes never left the spot. Caleb pressed down. Nothing. He shifted his weight. Still nothing. Then he noticed it. A small indentation at the corner, too precise to be accidental. He pushed. A low mechanical sound answered from beneath the floor. A lock releasing. The panel shifted, barely at first, then lifted with a smooth, controlled motion, revealing darkness beneath. Cold air rushed up, different from the rest of the house. Heavier. Duke didn't hesitate. He stepped forward to the edge, nose dipping into the opening, then pulled back slightly, not in fear, but in calculation. Something down there mattered. Caleb stood slowly. "Well," he said under his breath, "guess we found it." He reached for a nearby wall. Nothing. No visible switches. No lights. He pulled a small flashlight from his pocket, old, scratched, but reliable, and flicked it on. A narrow beam cut into the darkness. Stairs. Metal. descending deeper beneath the house. The beam didn't reach the bottom. Caleb hesitated for a fraction of a second. Every instinct he had told him this was where things changed. Above ground, there had been unease. Down there would be answers. And maybe something worse. He looked down at Duke. "You ready?" Duke met his gaze. No hesitation, no fear, just that steady, unwavering presence. Caleb nodded once. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We go together." He stepped onto the first stair. The metal rang softly under his weight. Duke followed immediately, moving ahead just enough to lead, but not far enough to disappear into the dark. Step by step, they descended. The temperature dropped with every foot. The air tightened. The silence thickened. Then, light. Faint at first. A soft glow rising from below. Caleb slowed. Duke froze. Both of them listening. Nothing moved. No voices. No machines. Just that low, steady hum, barely audible but constant. Alive. They reached the bottom. The space opened up into a wide underground chamber. Caleb's flashlight became unnecessary. Overhead lights, dim but functional, lined the ceiling, casting a sterile glow across the room. And in the center of it, stacks, crates. Metal containers. Organized. Precise. Caleb stepped forward slowly. His eyes moved across the space, then stopped. Cash. Bundles of it. Neatly wrapped. Secured. Stacked in quantities that didn't make sense. Next to it, gold bars. Real, untouched. Heavy enough to shift the air around them. And beyond that, locked cases, documents, hard drives, all labeled, all deliberate, all waiting. Caleb didn't speak. For a long moment, he just stood there. Then he let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. That's a lot of money. Duke didn't react. Not to the cash. Not to the gold. He moved past it. Straight through the center of the room, ignoring everything that would have stopped anyone else in their tracks. Caleb noticed. Not interested, huh? Duke reached the far side of the chamber and stopped. There, the wall wasn't stone. It was reinforced steel. And at its center, another door. Smaller, stronger, more important. Duke sat. Again. Perfectly still, eyes fixed. Caleb followed slowly. His gaze shifted back once to the fortune behind him, then forward again, to the door. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That figures." He stepped closer. This door was different. No visible seams, no obvious mechanism. But this time, there was a panel, embedded beside it. Dark. Inactive. Caleb reached out, brushing his fingers across it. Nothing. Duke let out a low sound. Not a warning. A signal. Pay attention. Caleb looked closer. At the panel. At the door. Then back at the room. The money. The gold. All of it suddenly felt like a distraction, like it had been placed there on purpose, to catch the wrong kind of person. "It's not the money," Caleb said under his breath. Duke didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the door, waiting. Caleb exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he said. "You knew that already." He stepped closer to the panel, and for the first time since entering the mansion, he felt it clearly. This wasn't an inheritance. It was a test. And he had just stepped into the part that mattered. Behind him, the fortune sat untouched. In front of him, the real secret waited. And somewhere far above, the house remained silent. But not empty. Never empty. Caleb placed his hand against the panel. The surface flickered. Faint. Almost alive. And Duke, for the first time since they entered the chamber, didn't look away. Something had just changed. And whatever came next was no longer about survival. It was about truth. The panel beneath Caleb's hand flickered again, soft at first, like it was testing him. Then it lit. A pale blue glow spread across its surface, thin lines forming patterns that shifted too quickly to follow. For a second, nothing happened. Then a voice. Calm, controlled, not loud, but impossible to ignore. Identity confirmation required. Caleb didn't move. Duke stood now, his body angled slightly between Caleb and the door, ears forward, listening, not to the words, but to the space around them. "Yeah," Caleb muttered under his breath. "Figures." He pulled his hand back. The panel dimmed instantly. Silence returned. Duke let out a low breath, tension easing just a fraction. Caleb glanced at him. "You don't like this either." Duke's eyes stayed on the door. Not afraid, just certain. Caleb looked back at the panel, then over his shoulder, to the room behind them. The stacks of money, the gold, the illusion of wealth sitting untouched, irrelevant now. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's see what you were hiding." He moved back toward the center of the chamber. The crates were labeled. Not randomly. Each one carried markings, codes, dates, abbreviations that meant nothing at first glance, but everything to someone who understood structure. Military structure. Caleb crouched beside one of the metal cases and snapped it open. Inside, documents. Not paper records meant for show. Real files. Detailed, precise, organized. He flipped through them. Names, operations, financial transfers, companies. Layer after layer of connections that didn't belong in the same place. His jaw tightened. "This isn't just money," he said under his breath. Duke shifted behind him. Not restless. Watching. Caleb kept going. Another case, more files. Then, a name. His hand stopped. Caleb Walker, printed clean across the top of a sealed folder. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't breathe. Duke stepped closer. Caleb slowly picked up the folder, turned it over. Still his name. Not recent, not new. Dated. Years ago. No, Caleb muttered. He opened it. Inside, photos. Old ones. Him. In uniform. Different deployments. Different locations. Records he knew were classified. Psych evaluations. After-action reports. Even notes. Handwritten, precise, observant. Not from the military. From someone else. Studying him. Tracking him. Why? Caleb whispered. Duke's ears flicked. Something above them. Faint. But there. Caleb froze. Listened. Nothing followed. Just the same low hum beneath the floor. He forced himself to focus. Back to the file. One page stood out. Different paper. Different format. A note. Short. Direct. If you are reading this, then the system worked. Caleb's eyes narrowed. He turned the page. A small device slipped free, thin, rectangular, no markings. He stared at it for a second, then pressed it. The chamber lights dimmed. A soft projection flickered into existence in front of him. A man appeared. Mid-60s, sharp features, controlled expression. Arthur Whitlock. Even without context, Caleb knew. The man looked straight ahead, as if he had expected this exact moment. If you're seeing this, Whitlock said calmly, then you made it past the surface. Caleb didn't blink. Duke didn't move. Whitlock continued. My name is Arthur Whitlock, and if you are Caleb Walker, then everything has gone according to plan. Caleb's jaw tightened. You don't know me, Whitlock said, but I know you. Images flashed briefly beside him. Caleb's file. His service record. You were never supposed to end up where you did, Whitlock continued. You were built for survival, for decision-making under pressure, for loyalty beyond reason. Caleb's grip on the folder tightened. That's why I chose you. The words landed harder than anything else. Chosen. Not found. Not random. Chosen. I needed someone who wouldn't fold, Whitlock said. Someone who understands cost. Someone who won't sell what they don't fully understand. The projection shifted slightly. Behind Whitlock, the same chamber appeared, but active. Screens running. Systems alive. This estate is not a gift, he said. It's a safeguard. Caleb's breathing slowed. Focused. Whitlock stepped closer to the camera. The money is noise, he said. A barrier. Something to distract the wrong people. Caleb glanced back at the stacks behind him, then forward again. What matters is what you haven't opened yet. The projection flickered, pointing toward the reinforced door. Duke's gaze followed instantly. Locked. Whitlock's expression hardened slightly. There are people who will come for this, he said. They already have. They will not stop. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Your name was never meant to be public, Whitlock continued. But I made sure it was attached to this transfer. That guarantees one thing. A pause. They will find you. The chamber felt colder. Caleb didn't look away. Why me? He said quietly, even though the man couldn't hear him. Whitlock answered anyway. Because you already lost everything, he said, and that makes you harder to break. Silence followed. Then, one last thing. Whitlock's voice lowered. If you're still here, then your dog stayed with you. Caleb's eyes flicked to Duke. Duke didn't move. Whitlock gave a faint nod. Good, he said. Trust him more than anything in this place. The projection glitched, then steadied. The door ahead of you doesn't open for curiosity, Whitlock said. It opens for decision. A final pause. Once you step through it, there's no going back. The image cut. The room returned to its dim, quiet state. Caleb stayed where he was, the file still open in his hands. Duke stepped closer, pressed lightly against him. Caleb exhaled slowly. You knew, he said quietly. You knew this wasn't about the money. Duke didn't respond. He didn't need to. Caleb looked at the reinforced door again, then at the panel, then back at the file with his name on it. You picked me, he muttered. Not anger, not disbelief, just something heavier. Understanding. The house wasn't waiting for anyone. It was waiting for him. And now it had him. Duke shifted again, stepping forward, closer to the door. Sitting. Waiting. Same signal. Same certainty. Caleb nodded once. Yeah, he said. I get it now. He walked toward the panel again. This time, he didn't hesitate. Because whatever was behind that door was the reason all of this existed. And for the first time since he stepped onto the property, Caleb Walker wasn't reacting. He was choosing. And that changed everything. Caleb stood in front of the reinforced door, the faint blue panel glowing beneath his hand. The weight of Whitlock's words settled in his chest, not as fear, but as clarity. This wasn't about what he had been given. It was about what he would do with it. Duke shifted slightly beside him, not restless. Listening. Caleb froze. There it was. Faint. Far above them. A sound. Not the house settling. Not the wind. Rhythmic. Measured. Boots. Duke's body went rigid. Ears forward. Eyes locked upward. The growl returned, low, controlled, unmistakable. Caleb pulled his hand away from the panel instantly. All right, he whispered. We're not alone anymore. The hum in the chamber seemed to deepen, as if the house itself had heard it too. Caleb moved quickly now, back toward the stairs, every step controlled, silent. Duke stayed ahead this time, leading, pausing at each turn, checking angles before moving again. The air changed as they climbed, colder, sharper, more alive. By the time they reached the top, the silence from before was gone, replaced by something worse. Movement. Faint shadows shifting across the far end of the hallway. Caleb flattened himself against the wall just before the stairwell opened fully into the corridor. His breathing slowed instantly, controlled, precise. Gone was the hesitation. Gone was the confusion. What remained? Training. Duke stayed pressed close to him, low to the ground, eyes tracking the hallway ahead. The sound came again, closer now. Multiple sets. Caleb leaned just enough to see. 3 figures, dark clothing, moving in formation, weapons raised, not casually, but with purpose. Professional, not local, not random. They didn't belong here, which meant they knew exactly where they were. Caleb pulled back into cover. "Yeah," he whispered. "They found it." Duke's gaze flicked to him. Waiting. Caleb's mind moved fast. Entry points, sight lines, distance to the main door, distance to the underground access. No weapons, no backup, just him. And Duke. He exhaled once. "Okay," he said quietly. "We don't fight straight." Duke didn't move, but his body shifted slightly. Ready. Caleb scanned the hallway again. The figures moved with precision, one covering the rear, the others advancing slowly, clearing doorways, checking corners. They weren't guessing. They were searching for something specific. "For what you left me," Caleb muttered under his breath. Duke's ears flicked. Another sound. Outside. Engines, more than one. Caleb's jaw tightened. They didn't come alone. He moved back down the stairs a few steps, pulling Duke with him into deeper shadow. "Listen," he said, voice low but firm. "We move smart. You stay close." Duke met his eyes. No hesitation. No doubt. Caleb nodded once. Good. He turned and moved quickly back into the underground chamber. The moment his boots hit the floor below, something changed. A low mechanical hum rose slightly. Lights flickered. Duke paused mid-step. Alert. Caleb noticed. What now? The walls responded. Not visually, audibly. A faint click, then another. Systems waking. Whitlock hadn't just built a vault. He had built a response. Caleb stepped toward the central console, one he hadn't fully examined before. Now, faint indicators blinked to life across its surface. Inactive. Then active. Duke moved to his side, watching. Caleb reached out cautiously. The moment his hand touched the console, the chamber shifted. Screens flickered on along the walls, displaying grainy exterior views. The estate, from multiple angles. Caleb stepped closer. Figures moving across the snow. At least 6. More approaching from the tree line. Coordinated. Disciplined. They were locking it down, Caleb said. Duke let out a low growl. Not fear. Recognition. Caleb's eyes scanned the feeds. They're not here to search, he said quietly. They're here to take, or erase. The thought didn't need to be spoken. A new alert flashed across one of the screens. Perimeter breach detected. Caleb exhaled slowly. All right. He straightened. The hesitation was gone now, replaced by something harder, colder, familiar. They want in, he said. Duke shifted closer. Ready. Caleb glanced at him. Then we make it difficult. He moved quickly now, back to the stairwell, then up again into the main level. Every movement precise, calculated. The house layout burned into his mind already. Entry points, blind spots, choke points. The front doors would hold, for a while. But not forever. He reached the main hall just as a dull impact echoed from the far end. The front entrance. They had started. Duke's body tensed. Caleb crouched low, moving along the wall, keeping to the shadows. Another impact. Heavier. The doors wouldn't last. Caleb scanned the space quickly. Furniture, glass, minimal cover, not ideal, but usable. He moved to the side corridor, positioning himself where he could see the entry without being exposed. Duke settled beside him, silent. Waiting. The third impact came. Louder. Wood cracking. Metal bending. Caleb's breathing slowed further. Heartbeat steady. Every sense sharp. This wasn't the man in the truck anymore. This wasn't the man at the diner. This was the man Whitlock had chosen. The one who didn't run. The door finally gave. A sharp crack. Then silence. For half a second. Then, they entered, one by one. Careful. Controlled. Weapons raised. Caleb didn't move, didn't reveal himself. He watched. Counted. Tracked. 3 inside. More outside. Duke's ears flicked. Another direction. Another angle. They were spreading. Caleb leaned slightly closer to him. "Stay with me," he whispered. Duke didn't need the command. He never had. The house that had felt empty before now felt alive. Not with comfort, with conflict. And Caleb Walker, who had spent so long trying to survive the past, was now standing in the middle of something far bigger. Not running, not hiding, but holding ground. Because whatever Whitlock had left behind was worth fighting for. And the night had only just begun. The first man crossed the threshold slowly. Boots quiet against stone, weapon raised, eyes scanning in short, disciplined movements. He wasn't guessing. He was clearing. The second followed, covering a different angle. The third stayed just inside the door, watching the exterior, waiting for the rest of the team to close the perimeter. Caleb didn't move. From the shadow of the side corridor, he tracked each one, distance, timing, posture. Not amateurs, not desperate men chasing rumors. This was a retrieval team. Duke's breathing stayed steady beside him, but his body was coiled tight, ready to spring in any direction Caleb needed. Another pair entered, then another. 6 inside now. More outside. Too many to confront head-on. Caleb leaned closer to Duke, his voice barely a whisper. Not yet. Duke didn't shift, but his ears flicked once, acknowledging. A faint click echoed deeper in the house. Then, a change. The lights dimmed slightly, almost imperceptible, but Caleb felt it. So did Duke. The house was waking up. One of the men paused. "Did you see that?" he murmured to the others. Another voice, calm and controlled. Stay focused. Move. They continued forward. Toward the main hallway. Toward the stairwell. Toward the truth below. Caleb exhaled slowly. They're going underground. Duke's gaze locked toward the same direction. Caleb made his decision. We don't let them walk straight into it. He shifted his position, moving deeper into the side corridor, drawing the team away from the direct path. Not by noise, by movement, just enough. A shadow crossing a doorway, a reflection in glass. Something a trained eye wouldn't ignore. One of the men caught it instantly. Movement left. Two of them broke formation, peeling off toward Caleb's position. Good. Caleb moved, silent, fast. He slipped through the next doorway, then another, using the house like a maze, keeping walls between him and the advancing team, forcing them to split. Duke followed perfectly, never breaking stride, never making a sound. Behind them, footsteps quickened. Clear that room, watch your corners. They were adapting. So was Caleb. He reached a narrow hallway and stopped abruptly, pressing himself flat against the wall. Duke mirrored him on the opposite side. The footsteps approached, closer. One of the men rounded the corner and stopped, just for a second. That was enough. Duke moved, fast, silent. A blur of motion that closed the distance before the man could react. The impact drove him backward, his balance breaking as Caleb stepped forward, disarming him in one controlled movement. No wasted motion, no hesitation. The man hit the ground hard. Caleb didn't stay, didn't linger. He pulled Duke back instantly. Move. They disappeared down the hallway before the others reached the corner. Shouts followed. Contact left. Spread out. Now they were alert. Fully. Caleb's breathing stayed steady. His pulse matched the rhythm of movement. This was what he knew. Not the truck. Not the cold roadside. This. Duke stayed tight at his side, eyes sharp, scanning every angle, every opening. They reached the central hall again, but from the opposite side now. Caleb glanced toward the stairwell. Two men heading for it, the rest fanning out. They're pushing hard, Caleb muttered. Duke growled, low, focused. Then, a new sound, sharp, louder than before. A heavy door slamming shut somewhere deeper in the structure. Then another, and another. The house was responding. Systems activating, barriers dropping. One of the men stopped mid-step. What is that? The answer came from everywhere. A low mechanical hum rising through the walls, lights flickering, then stabilizing. Caleb's eyes shifted. This place has defenses, he said under his breath. Duke's ears flicked. Above, below, everywhere. The hum deepened, and then movement. Not human, not visible at first, but present. One of the men turned suddenly. What the? A sharp burst of light flashed down the hallway. Not an explosion. Contained. Focused. The man dropped instantly, stunned, not moving. The others reacted fast. Cover. Contact unknown. But they couldn't see it. Caleb watched from the shadows. The house wasn't just waking up. It was fighting. Duke's posture shifted. Less defensive now, more aligned. Like he understood the pattern. Caleb didn't waste the moment. "Now," he said quietly. They moved again, cutting across the hall, using the chaos, staying ahead of the attackers without engaging directly. But the team adapted fast. Too fast. One of them anticipated the movement. Turned the corner at the exact wrong time, face to face with Caleb. No hesitation. The man raised his weapon. Duke moved first. He lunged, not wild, not uncontrolled, but precise, targeting the man's balance, forcing him off-center. Caleb closed the distance. Fast. Controlled. The confrontation ended in seconds, but not without cost. Duke pulled back. And Caleb saw it. A line of red across Duke's shoulder. Not deep, but real. Duke didn't react. Didn't slow. He stayed ready. Focused. But Caleb saw it. Felt it. A sharp spike of something cut through the calm. Anger. "All right," Caleb muttered, voice tightening. "That's enough." He moved differently now. Faster. More direct. The house continued to respond. Lights shifting, barriers moving, systems activating, but it wasn't enough to stop them completely. The attackers were still pushing, still advancing, still getting closer to the truth. Caleb reached the stairwell again, looked down. Footsteps below. They had reached the vault level. Duke stood beside him. Injured, but steady, waiting. Caleb placed a hand briefly on his shoulder. "You good?" Duke didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, just held position. Caleb nodded. "Then we're not done." He looked down into the darkness below. The real fight wasn't up here. It was down there, where the truth waited, and where the night was about to get worse. Caleb didn't hesitate. He moved down the stairwell fast, one hand trailing the rail, the other steady at his side, eyes already adjusting to the lower light. Duke followed without breaking stride, despite the blood along his shoulder. His steps were quieter now, more measured, but just as precise. Below them, the hum of the chamber had changed. It wasn't passive anymore. It was active. Alive. Caleb slowed as he reached the final steps, stopping just before the open vault. The glow from the lights inside stretched into the stairwell, casting long shadows across the walls. Duke stopped beside him. Ears forward. Listening. Voices. Low, close. They were here. Spread out. Check everything. Caleb leaned just enough to see. Two of them had made it down. Moving through the vault, checking the crates. The money. The gold. One of them opened a case, rifled through the contents, then shook his head. "This isn't it." "Keep looking," the other replied. "It's here." Caleb pulled back. "They don't know yet," he whispered. Duke's eyes stayed locked on the chamber, waiting. Caleb scanned quickly. Options. Limited. Time. Less. Then, another sound. Behind them. Upstairs. More movement. The rest of the team closing in. "They're gonna box us in," Caleb said. Duke shifted slightly. Not retreating, just adjusting. Caleb nodded once. "Yeah, I see it too." He looked back toward the chamber, then down at Duke. "Stay close," he said. Duke's eyes met his. Steady. Caleb moved. Fast. He descended the last steps and stepped into the vault without hesitation. The two men turned instantly. Too late. Duke moved first, cutting the distance with silent speed, forcing one of them off balance. Caleb stepped in at the same moment, redirecting the second man's movement, pushing him away from the center of the room. The space worked in Caleb's favor. Tight. Controlled. No room for chaos. Within seconds, the confrontation ended. No noise carried beyond the chamber. No time for anyone else to react. Caleb stepped back, breathing steady, controlled. Duke returned to his side, posture still tight but stable. Caleb glanced at his shoulder again. "Still with me?" Duke didn't move. Didn't need to. Caleb nodded. "Good." He turned. The vault stretched out in front of him again, but now it felt different. Not hidden, not secret. Exposed and vulnerable. Caleb moved quickly toward the far end, the reinforced door. The real one. The one Duke had marked from the start. The panel beside it flickered faintly. Still active. Still waiting. Caleb placed his hand against it. This time, no hesitation. The panel lit fully. Bright. Responsive. Identity confirmed. The voice returned. Clearer now. More certain. Duke stepped closer. Watching. The reinforced door unlocked with a deep mechanical sound. Heavy. Final. It slid open slowly, revealing another room smaller, contained, but more important than everything else. Caleb stepped inside. The air changed immediately. Cleaner, colder, focused. The room wasn't filled with money. It was filled with equipment. Screens, servers, storage units, all active, all running, and at the center, a single workstation. Caleb approached it slowly. Duke followed, still alert, still watching the entrance behind them. Caleb reached the console. The screens activated instantly. Lines of data, names, locations, financial trails, connections that stretched across cities, countries, systems. Too big, too organized, too deliberate. "This isn't just records," Caleb muttered. Duke didn't react. He stayed focused on the room, protecting. Caleb scrolled, faster. The pattern became clear. Companies. Officials. Operations hidden behind layers of legitimate fronts. Everything connected. Everything traceable. Everything dangerous. Then, a file opened automatically. A video. Whitlock again. But different this time. Older, tired. The man who had built this place wasn't calm anymore. He was urgent. "If you're seeing this," Whitlock said, his voice lower, sharper, "then they've already come." Caleb's eyes didn't leave the screen. This was never about wealth, Whitlock continued. The money was cover, noise, something to keep the wrong people distracted. Caleb glanced back at the vault, then forward again. What's here, Whitlock said, is leverage. The word hung in the air. Heavy. This system contains everything, Whitlock continued. Proof of operations that were never meant to be seen. Networks that exist above the law. Caleb's jaw tightened. Whoever controls this, Whitlock said, controls the truth. Duke shifted. A low sound in his chest. Warning. Caleb didn't look away. They will try to take it, Whitlock said. If they can't, they will destroy it. A pause. And you. Caleb's grip on the edge of the console tightened. I chose you because you understand cost, Whitlock said. Because you've already lost enough to know what matters. Another pause. Short. Deliberate. You were never meant to walk away from this. The screen flickered, then stabilized. One final directive, Whitlock said. Protect it, or make sure no one else can use it. The video ended. Silence returned. Caleb stood there, still, processing. Behind him, Duke's posture shifted again, more urgent now. The threat hadn't gone away. It had gotten closer. Caleb turned, looked at the doorway, then back at the system, at the data, at the truth. This is what they came for, he said quietly. Duke didn't move, but his presence said everything. Caleb reached forward, pulled a small encrypted drive from the system. Compact. Simple, but heavier than anything else in the room. He held it in his hand and understood. This is it, he said. Not money, not gold. This. Behind him, footsteps. Closer now. More of them. Caleb exhaled slowly. The decision was no longer theoretical. It was now. Real. Immediate. He slipped the drive into his jacket, turned toward the exit. Duke moved with him instantly. Ready. Focused. Caleb gave one last glance at the room. At everything Whitlock had built. Then he stepped out. Because the truth wasn't safe here anymore, and neither were they. Caleb stepped out of the inner chamber, the reinforced door sliding shut behind him with a final heavy sound that echoed through the vault. Duke was already moving. Not forward. Not retreating. Positioning. He angled himself between Caleb and the stairwell, body low, ears locked toward the approaching footsteps above. They were closer now, no longer cautious. No longer searching. They knew Caleb moved fast. Back across the vault, past the stacks of money that no longer meant anything, toward the central console. The screens still flickered with unstable feeds, partial views of the house above. More movement. More figures. They're pushing through, Caleb said under his breath. Duke let out a low growl. Not loud, but certain. Caleb reached the console and scanned it quickly. Options, security systems, manual overrides. Most of it locked behind protocols he didn't have time to understand. But one section, highlighted. Emergency response. Whitlock had left more than just information. He had left a way out. Caleb tapped the panel. The system responded instantly. A schematic of the estate appeared across the main screen. Levels, corridors, hidden passages. One path pulsed in red. A route leading away from the vault. Away from the main structure. An exit. Duke shifted closer, watching. Caleb traced the route with his eyes. "That's our way out," he said quietly. Then he looked back toward the stairwell. The footsteps had reached the top. Paused. Then, descending. "They're coming down." Duke didn't move, but his entire body tightened. Ready. Caleb's eyes flicked between the path on the screen and the entrance to the vault. Two choices. Hold or move. Whitlock's words echoed in his mind. "You were never meant to walk away from this." Caleb exhaled slowly, then shook his head. "No," he said. Duke's ears flicked. Caleb turned to him. "We don't hold ground, we can't win." Duke held his gaze. Understanding. Caleb reached out, placing a firm hand against Duke's neck. "You're hurt," he said quietly. "We don't stay here." Duke didn't step back, didn't retreat. He stayed exactly where he was, between Caleb and the threat. Caleb felt it. That pull, that instinct. Stand your ground. Finish it. But this wasn't that kind of fight. Not anymore. He tightened his grip slightly. "That's not the mission," he said. Duke's posture didn't change, but his eyes softened, just a fraction. "Enough." Caleb nodded once. "Good." He turned back to the console and activated the route. The wall behind the central chamber shifted. A section of reinforced steel slid back, revealing a narrow corridor. Dark. Cold. Leading away from everything. The escape path. At the same moment, the stairwell door burst open. Voices, closer now. "They're down here! Move!" Caleb stepped back from the console. Time was gone. "Let's go," he said. He turned toward the corridor. Duke didn't follow. Not immediately. Caleb stopped. Turned. Duke stood facing the stairwell. Still. Alert, blocking, waiting. Caleb understood. "You're buying time." Duke didn't move. Didn't need to. Caleb shook his head. "No." He stepped back toward him. Not alone. Duke's ears flicked. Caleb crouched beside him, hand firm against his shoulder. We moved together. For a second, the world narrowed. Just the two of them. The noise above, the path behind, the choice in front. Then Duke shifted. Turned. Stepped toward the corridor. Decision made. Together. Caleb nodded. Good. They moved. Fast. into the narrow passage. Behind them, boots hit the floor of the vault. Shouts echoed. They were here. Search everything. Caleb didn't look back. The corridor sloped upward, tight and confined, forcing them into single file. The air was colder here, untouched, carrying the faint scent of metal and earth. Duke stayed ahead now, leading. Despite the injury, despite the blood, he didn't slow. Caleb followed close behind, one hand brushing the wall for balance, the other steady near his side. The tunnel twisted, turned, climbed. Then, a sharp sound behind them, metal striking metal. They had found the passage. They're heading out. Move! Caleb's pace increased. Keep going, he said. Duke didn't need the command. The tunnel narrowed further, then widened suddenly into a vertical shaft with a ladder built into the wall. Light filtered faintly from above. The exit. Caleb grabbed the ladder. Up. Duke jumped first, claws gripping the metal rungs with practiced ease. He climbed quickly, despite the injury, never losing rhythm. Caleb followed, every movement controlled, every breath measured. Below them, the tunnel filled with movement. Too close now, too fast. Caleb didn't stop, didn't look down, just climbed, rung by rung, toward the light, toward the cold air waiting above, toward whatever came next. Because there was no going back. Not to the truck, not to the roadside, not to the man he had been. That life was gone. Burned away the moment he stepped into this house. The truth was in his pocket. The target was on his back. And the only way forward was through. Duke reached the top first, disappeared through the opening. Caleb followed seconds later, pulling himself up into the night air. The cold hit hard. Sharp. Real. He rolled onto the ground beside the opening, catching his breath for half a second before pushing himself up. Duke stood a few feet ahead, facing the forest. Alert. Ready. Behind them, hidden beneath snow and brush, the entrance sealed itself shut. Gone. Like it had never existed. But the danger hadn't disappeared. It had followed them out. Caleb looked down at Duke, then out into the trees. "All right," he said quietly. His voice didn't shake. "We keep moving." Because now, there was no house, no walls, no systems, just the mountains, the dark, and the truth they carried. And that meant one thing. There was no way back. Only forward. The forest swallowed them whole. Tall pines closed overhead, their branches heavy with snow, muting the world into a cold, endless hush. The wind moved differently here, less open, more controlled, slipping between the trees, like something watching rather than passing through. Caleb didn't slow. Duke ran ahead, weaving through the narrow spaces between trunks, his movements sharp but steady despite the injury along his shoulder. The dark line of blood had spread, matted into his fur, but he didn't falter. Not once. Caleb followed, boots crunching against frozen ground, breath visible in sharp bursts as the cold cut deeper into his lungs. Behind them, distant voices. Faint, but real. They're out. Spread wide, they're heading north. Caleb didn't look back. He didn't need to. "They're tracking," he said under his breath. Duke's ears flicked. He veered slightly to the right, adjusting the path, choosing terrain that would break sightlines, disrupt movement. Caleb trusted it. Always had. The forest thickened. Branches clawed at his jacket, snow dropping in soft bursts as they pushed through. The ground sloped unevenly, rising and falling without warning, forcing constant adjustment. Then a sound. Louder. Different. Caleb slowed just enough to register it. Behind them. The low roar of something building. He turned. Through the trees, just barely visible, light. Not natural, not steady. Flashing. Then, a deep concussive boom rolled through the mountains. The ground trembled. Snow fell in thick sheets from the branches above. Caleb's eyes narrowed. The house. Another explosion followed. Distant, but unmistakable. Whitlock's final defense. Destroy what can't be taken. Duke stopped. Turned. For the first time since they left the tunnel, he looked back. Not toward the men. Toward the mansion. Caleb stepped beside him. Through the gaps in the trees, flames now licked upward against the night sky, cutting through the darkness in violent bursts of orange and red. Smoke rose thick and fast, twisting into the cold air like a signal that couldn't be ignored. "It's gone," Caleb said quietly. Duke didn't move. For a moment, neither of them did. Then, a crack echoed from somewhere deeper in the woods. Closer this time. Not an explosion. A branch snapping. Movement. Duke turned instantly. Back to the present. Back to the threat. Caleb's focus snapped with him. "Yeah," he muttered. "They're still coming." He pushed forward again. Faster now. The forest began to thin slightly as the ground rose toward a higher ridge. The air shifted, colder, sharper, cutting through layers of exhaustion and adrenaline. Duke's pace faltered, just for a second. Barely noticeable. But Caleb saw it. "Hey." Duke kept moving. But the rhythm was off. Caleb closed the distance, reaching out and catching his shoulder gently. "Stop." Duke resisted. Not pulling away, but not stopping either, still trying to move forward. Caleb's voice hardened slightly. "Duke." That did it. The dog slowed, then stopped. Barely. Caleb crouched beside him, hand running along his side until it reached the wound. The blood had darkened, thick against his fur. Not life-threatening. But enough. Enough to matter. "You're pushing too hard," Caleb said quietly. Duke looked at him, eyes steady, unwavering, the same look he had always given. "We keep going." Caleb exhaled slowly. "I know." Behind them, voices again. Closer now. Too close. Caleb looked up, scanned the terrain, the ridge ahead. Steeper, harder ground, better visibility. "We get up there," he said. "We buy space." Duke didn't wait. He turned and started forward again, slower now, but determined. Caleb followed. The climb was harder. Steep incline, loose rock under thin layers of snow. Each step took effort. Each breath burned. But they kept moving. Because stopping wasn't an option. Halfway up, a beam of light cut through the trees below. Flashlight, sweeping, searching. They re-close, Caleb muttered. Duke growled low, but didn't stop. Another beam joined the first, then another. The forest below lit in shifting patterns. They were spreading out. Hunting. Caleb pushed harder. Come on! The ridge crest came into view, just a few yards ahead. Duke reached it first, pulled himself over, then turned, waiting. Caleb climbed the last stretch, boots slipping once before catching again. He pulled himself up beside Duke and rolled onto the frozen ground. For a second, silence. Real silence. Then Caleb pushed himself up, turned, looked down. The forest stretched below them. Dark. Endless. Except for the lights. 3, 4, moving slowly through the trees, searching. They hadn't lost them, but they hadn't caught them either. Not yet. Caleb stepped forward, placing himself between the ridge and Duke. Shielding. Instinct. Duke stood beside him. Still. Breathing heavier now, but standing. Caleb rested a hand briefly against his neck. You held, he said quietly. Duke didn't respond. He didn't need to. The fire from the mansion still burned in the distance, casting a faint glow across the horizon. Smoke curled into the sky, marking the place where everything had changed. Caleb looked at it one last time, then turned away. Because whatever that place had been, it was gone now. And what came next wouldn't be fought behind walls. It would be fought out here, in the open, with nothing but the ground beneath them, and each other. Caleb adjusted his jacket, feeling the weight of the drive still secure inside. The truth. The reason all of this had started. He looked down at Duke, then out toward the mountains beyond the ridge. We're not done, he said. Duke's ears lifted forward. Ready. Caleb nodded once. Yeah, he added, not even close. Then he turned, and together they disappeared into the dark. The forest carried them for miles. No trail, no road, just a shifting maze of pine and shadow, where the ground rose and fell without warning, and the cold pressed deeper with every step. Caleb kept moving until the sounds behind them were gone, until even Duke's ears stopped tracking the direction they had come from. Only then did he slow. The ridge they found was narrow but clear, a break in the trees where the mountain opened toward the valley below. Dawn hadn't fully arrived yet, but the sky had begun to change. Dark blue softening at the edges, the first hint of light pushing back the night. Caleb stopped there, breathing hard, exhaustion settling in now that the adrenaline had burned itself down. Duke came to a halt beside him. For a second, the dog swayed, just slightly. Caleb caught it instantly. Easy. He dropped to one knee, steadying Duke with one hand, the other already moving to check the wound. The blood had slowed, but the damage was clear now under the growing light. Torn fur, a deep scrape along the muscle. Not fatal, but not something to ignore. Caleb pulled his jacket off, tearing a strip from the inner lining. His fingers moved with practiced efficiency, cleaning what he could, wrapping it tight enough to hold. Duke didn't pull away, didn't flinch. He just stood there, watching Caleb the way he always did. Present. Steady. Caleb tied off the makeshift bandage and sat back slightly. "That's the best I got right now," he said quietly. Duke lowered himself to the ground beside him. Carefully. Controlled. Caleb let out a slow breath and sat down as well, back against a cold rock, the valley stretching out in front of them. For the first time since the truck, since the letter, since the house, there was no immediate movement. No voices, no pursuit. Just the mountains silent. Endless, the fire from the mansion was still visible in the distance. Faint now, reduced to a low glow beneath a rising column of smoke. What had been a fortress, a secret, a world hidden beneath stone and steel, was gone. Caleb stared at it for a long time. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out the drive. Small, unremarkable, cold against his palm. He turned it over slowly. "This is what they wanted," he said. Duke's ears flicked slightly. Listening. Caleb looked down at him. "And now it's ours. Not wealth, not comfort, not safety, something heavier, something that came with consequences." He leaned his head back against the rock, closing his eyes for just a moment. Images flickered behind them. The truck, the roadside, the long stretch of nothing that had defined his days. Gone. Replaced. Not by something easier, but by something clearer. Purpose. He opened his eyes again. The sky had shifted further now, thin streaks of pale orange cutting through the horizon. The first light touched the tops of the trees, turning frost into something almost golden. Duke shifted slightly beside him. Closer. Caleb rested a hand against his neck. "You knew," he said quietly. Duke didn't move, didn't answer. But Caleb knew. He always had. From the moment that envelope showed up. From the moment Duke growled at something no one else could see. From the moment he chose the floor over the fortune. "You saw it before I did," Caleb murmured. Duke blinked slowly. Caleb let out a faint breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Yeah," he said, "that tracks." He looked back out over the valley. The world was waking up, slow, unaware. People in towns miles away would start their day like any other, coffee, work, routine. They wouldn't know what had burned in the mountains overnight. They wouldn't know what had changed. Caleb looked down at the drive again. They wouldn't know what he carried. Not yet. He closed his hand around it. Whitlock's words came back to him. Protect it, or make sure no one else can use it. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. Guess that's on me now. Duke lifted his head. Alert again. Not to danger, to direction. Caleb followed his gaze. Beyond the ridge, the mountains stretched farther, roads hidden between them, towns tucked into valleys, places where a man could disappear or choose not to. Caleb pushed himself up slowly. His body protested. He ignored it. He looked down at Duke. "Think you can move?" Duke stood, carefully, but steady. Always steady. Caleb nodded once. Good. He slipped the drive back into his jacket, securing it close. Then he took one last look behind them, at the fading smoke, at the place where everything had started. Then he turned forward, because there was no going back. Not to who he had been. Not to the life that had left him behind. That man, the one in the truck, the one no one saw, he was gone. Burned away in fire and truth. What stood here now was something else. Someone who understood the weight of what he carried. Someone who wouldn't run from it. Caleb Walker adjusted his jacket, the cold biting again, but different this time. It didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to move through. He looked down at Duke. "Let's go." Duke stepped forward. No hesitation. No doubt. Just loyalty. Just purpose. Caleb followed. And as the first full light of day broke across the mountains, casting long shadows behind them, he felt something settle inside him. Not peace, not yet, but direction. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't lost. He wasn't just surviving. He was carrying something that mattered, something that could change everything. And for the first time in a long time, he knew exactly what he was supposed to do. Protect it. No matter what came next. Because the world didn't know his name. But it would feel his choices. And Caleb Walker, the man no one saw, had finally become the man he was meant to be. Type yes if you believe a man should stand his ground when everything is on the line, or no if you'd walk away and leave it behind. There's something about loyalty, land, and doing what's right that still matters in this country. If this story meant something to you, stick around. There's more stories like this waiting for you here.